Okay, good evening to you all. I'm going to call this special work session, well, it's a regular work session, to order. And thank you all for being here. We have hopefully a very workable agenda this evening that won't take us so long to finish up. But for staff members who are here, we'll try to move through it expeditiously, sure enough. Council, the first order of business, I believe, is the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions about the agenda or changes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? There is none. Okay, I believe there are no presentations that I'm aware of, Ms. Clerk. Are there any? By the way, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I failed to have you call, I failed to have you call the roll. Would you do that at this time, please?
Mayor Marshburn.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Behringer.
Here.
Councilmember Dillinger.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Singleton.
Here.
Councilmember Vance.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first item of, next item of business is under item D, discussion and reports, and I believe we are prepared to hear from Mr. Mike Franks, who is here, who will lead us through this particular section. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight we're going to talk about inspection vehicle review. So talk about the current inspection fee, how it can be utilized, and then a potential proposal for how to utilize some excess funding that exists. So history of the legislation, impact on the inspections department, review some town-wide vehicle requirements, and also a recommendation. All right, so the impacting legislation, basically what this says in a couple different sections is that revenue generated by the inspections department has to be spent on inspection department related tasks. It can't be spent on other items, can't be spent for example, rents. If you're not going to charge rent to all your departments, you can't charge it to inspection. So it has to be spent on things that other departments are spending money on. It has to be spent on items to get the mission of inspections completed. I also wanted to include from your original packet some additional legislation as of January 1st, 2021. This will be the new legislation, and it's not significantly impactful in terms of the wording, but it is a little bit different, so I did just want to add that, and I thank you to the town attorney for making me aware of that so that we could go ahead and add that wording in. Again, it does not substantially change our recommendation or anything because it's just kind of rewritten, if you will, but it has the same general points, but wanted to make you aware. So in terms of the impact on inspections based on this legislation, it prevents the town from charging developers to offset the cost of non-inspection related activities. So I think one of the things that council has talked about, or I don't think we have talked about, is the idea of, as new developments are being built, charging additional fees to have those developments be inspected. This really limits your ability to do that because the revenue that you're generating can only be spent on inspection related purposes. And again, you can't really, people have tried to get creative and there isn't really a way to do that in terms of adding different people into the department. It really needs to be on inspection related tasks. Based on that and a couple big projects, primarily Amazon and a couple other big items, the town has accumulated funding totaling nearly $700,000 that can only be utilized for inspection related activities. So that's a pot of money that we have within the CAFR that we have set aside in kind of a reserved funds that can only be utilized for the purposes of improving or providing inspection-related activities. And based on staff believes it is prudent to reserve a portion of this funding for the downturn in the economy. However, a portion might be used to cover some inspection-related requirements. So at some point, it's likely that the inspections department will not be operating in the black, or they will not be generating additional revenue based on a slowdown in the economy. So we should obviously keep some funding available for that purpose. However, based on the size and the current trajectory of the economy, staff thinks it would be prudent to potentially utilize some of that funding for enhancing the inspection department. Which leads us into the town-wide vehicle requirements. The inspections department currently utilizes two-wheel drive trucks and sedans to conduct inspections. The department would be better served to utilize four-wheel drive trucks to perform their duties. So it's just obviously getting out there on a work site. Something like a sedan is not going to be as beneficial as a four-wheel drive vehicle. Same with two-wheel drive. So this, if they get stuck, Public Works has to come out and get them. So it's just not ideal to performing the task of inspections. And then town departments reviewed their current fleet and in many cases would benefit from a repurposed inspection of vehicles. So we reached out to various departments that have a fleet and talked to them about the possibility of if we were going to get rid of some of these two-wheel drive vehicles or the sedans and repurpose them within the town, would there be needs that you could have? Would there be another vehicle that we could replace a little bit early based on the fact that it's already a little bit older, or are there other needs that we could potentially take advantage of? So we're not trying to just buy new vehicles and get rid of the other ones, but to repurpose them within other departments. So here's the various departments that we felt like, or that indicated that they had a potential need. The engineering department, they currently utilize a Ford Fusion to perform a variety of duties and would benefit from a truck. So the Ford Fusion is currently in fair condition and could be utilized as a pool vehicle within Town Hall or elsewhere. So this would allow the engineering department, while not a four-wheel drive vehicle, but a vehicle that would be more suited to work sites, and the Ford Fusion could then be utilized by other town staff as kind of a pool vehicle, which would be available to all staff as needed. The police department, the evidence technician currently utilizes a Chevrolet Impala and would benefit from a truck. This is pretty natural. Obviously, they're going to have a variety of different items that they're going to need to carry around, so a truck would be more beneficial than a Impala. So the Chevy Impala is in a condition where town staff feels like it'd be beneficial just to go ahead and surplus that vehicle. The animal control officer utilizes a Ford F-150. It would benefit from an inspection truck. The Ford F-150 could be repurposed to parks for special events and for staff to utilize at the recreation center. So this would benefit the police department, and then public or parks consistently has a requirement for a random requirement, almost like the type of vehicle that you'd want to get at Home Depot on a random basis to do various things where you're going to have an event and they're going to need to put items in the back of a truck and move them around. So what we can do is buy a cheap, I think it already actually has a cover, but if it doesn't, we could have a cheap cover, which would allow them to have that item to be able to help out during special events, and then also have a vehicle for staff at the recreation center, so serving two purposes there. The planning department currently utilizes a Ford Taurus for various administrative tasks. This vehicle has experienced significant issues and could be replaced by a Ford Fusion from inspections. So this is replacing two different Ford Fusions, but the Ford Fusion in planning is just older and has kind of been a lemon according to the Public Works Department and Fleet. So it's really just repurposing one vehicle for another and allowing them to continue to be able to take vehicles to various meetings or to, I think they go to a lot of campo type meetings and things along those lines. And the planning department received a new position that requires a truck to visit construction sites. So similar purpose here, less requirements in terms of being out in the field than inspections, but it would be nice for them to have some sort of truck. So a truck from inspections could meet this requirement, and this would allow them to go out into work sites. So the staff's recommendation, basically that we go ahead with all those different replacements, buy inspections a new vehicle when indicated, and then repurpose the vehicle to the other department. New trucks would cost approximately $30,000 per year. This would result in a total cost of approximately $300,000. In addition to the 5 vehicles being repurposed, staff recommends the replacement of 3 vehicles based on their condition and 2 vehicles to meet current requirements. So in addition to some of the repurposed vehicles, there's some that just in inspections are a little bit older. We don't necessarily have a need for those, or they've just reached the end of life in terms of we don't think they're as valuable, so those vehicles would be replaced as well. And I would note here that with the $30,000 cost, we are buying the version of a four-wheel drive vehicle that meets a variety of different needs. So for example, Public Works, which is beyond police, one of our biggest users of vehicles, needs some extra packages, and I'm not going to be able to articulate all the different items they need, but a towing package and various different enhancements to allow the vehicles to be utilized for their purposes. So if, for example, this continues to be something we're able to do in a few years, these vehicles that we're currently purchasing could be utilized by Public Works, and we could do the same process where you might notice when we were going through the list, there aren't any Public Works repurposed vehicles because currently Public Works needs those special enhancements and the inspection vehicles don't. So we're making them more usable throughout the town if this becomes a recurring issue or a recurring opportunity for the town. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to council members in just a minute. Remind me, Michael, if this methodology has been used in previous years, is that right? Or is this the first time this is?
It has not. I don't remember the exact year of this legislation, but it's fairly new. Only been a couple of years.
Okay.
So this is a new situation where we have this excess funding where we were looking for opportunities to enhance the inspections department, allow them to perform their duties at a better level of service, and also potentially benefit other departments. So it's a new initiative.
Not to be confused with the VERT process.
Correct. Yeah, it would enhance our ability to. It allows other departments to get vehicles that would normally be replaced by VERT. So it's allowing us to maybe not spend as much on VERT as we would normally. I do it going through this process and spending some restricted dollars.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn to Mayor Pro Tem Behringer for any questions, comments. Okay, I'll go to Mr. Singleton.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, all right. Mr. Dellinger?
Yeah, just for my own education, what's the universe of justifiable expenditures of that money in inspection?
That'd be a better question for maybe Mr. Beasley, who I think is on, or Mr. Hodges. But I mean, it's going back to the legislation. I can't remember the exact wording.
The intent is for it to be direct expenditures of the department. And so, as Mr. Frank said earlier, some of the creative things that we have heard about were charging an inspections department rent for their space, but not charging every other department. Those are beyond those kind of things. So I think anything that would show up in the inspection department's budget, I don't mean to oversimplify the answer, but basically anything that would show up within their budget, it would probably need to be in that budget to qualify. Does that provide enough clarity?
Yeah, and we've talked about like indirect costs. So in theory, a portion of my salary is going to inspections, but it's the same type of thing where it's just that's a little bit too much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Matthews.
Michael, will these be like crew cab type pickups, or is there, you gonna do some of both, or?
I am not sure. Tony, do you remember what vehicle?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, Councilman Matthews, for asking that. They would be the exact vehicles that Public Works uses now, and like the new vehicles we got last year, 2 years ago, and one last year in our budget. They're four-door trucks. They're on state contract. It's just that these will have four-wheel drive. Therefore, they're become a more universal truck for repurposing back to Public Works, which has the highest demand that Michael covered if we ever have to cross this bridge again in the future.
That makes all the sense. That's why I was asking that question. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Vance?
I have no questions.
Okay. So, I believe on the agenda, it says no action required.
Yeah, so staff can come back with a necessary budget amendment to purchase the vehicles and then do the necessary work on the behind the scenes to repurpose the vehicles. So we can formalize it at that point.
Okay.
So we were just looking for guidance. So thank
Sure.
you.
All right, council. Yeah, good. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. It's a good explanation. All right, the next item of business is, it's probably a popular item, sidewalks. And so Mr. Hodges, I believe, is going to lead us through a discussion having to do with the bond funds update as it relates to sidewalks. So, Mr. Hodges?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Mr. Roy Lance is going to pass out a document that we'll refer to tonight. It's going to be in your slides, but I thought it might be more convenient for you to have a copy of it in front of you. We already update on the 2013 Street and Sidewalk Bond Fund update for council members who were on the council previously, and for possibly even our new members. You may have been familiar with this format of a report that we've used over the last few years to report back on the status of the bonds in each of the four categories. Tonight, we're just going to focus on street and sidewalks because we do have some time-sensitive type needs that we want to discuss with you. Just to orient you, the top of the report here is the total amount that was issued for the bond, so $14.566 million. The left column here under completed, these are all the projects that have been completed, $6.4 million. Over in the middle, we have a column that are committed. They're either in construction or in design, but you have given us the direction to move forward with them officially or unofficially. We have some items highlighted in red that we're going to come back to in a moment. Then over on so those total $9.3 million. Over on the right here, we have unallocated, the bond fund total, so this is just the difference between the two. So in this case, the completed plus the committed puts us $1.2 million over the available $14.56 million. But what we're bringing to you tonight to show you is something I'm not sure has been in a previous update. We do have other revenues associated with this particular bond fund that would need to remain with the bond fund. So we have interest earned as of October 31st on the bond funds over the years of $215,000. We have sales tax reimbursement of $8,000. That is a one-time, that is non-recurring. In the beginning of our bond program, we used to seek sales tax reimbursement and bill it back to the actual bond fund. So each of the bond funds had some sales tax that was paid, booked back to it, but we've changed our procedure for doing that. So you will not see that number increase well, actually the interest will not increase very much either with current situation, but the 8,000 is a static number. Then we have the net bond premium sales through bond sale 4. So as Davenport and or others may have mentioned recently, sometimes when we issue bonds, we are paid a premium on those. The premium less the cost of issuance for this particular fund was about $542,000, and then the liquidated damages from the Jones Sausage Road project were added here at $510,000 to offset the Jones Sausage Road design. So by adding those two back, we're just about at break even for the bond projects. Now that is making some assumptions that we won't have any cost overruns, and we do know that some of the projects that we're currently underway, there's possibility of that. To be able to get this to balance, we have moved several things to a new category here at the bottom that we're saying proposing to move to the next bond or propose to move to another funding source. One of those is sidewalk connectors that were estimated at about $100,000. These are 3 small connectors. One is between the Y and Summers Walk neighborhood. One is Bryan Road. We allowed the school construction to stop short of a creek crossing that was going to be an environmental impact. So we'd like to go back and fill that in at some point between the sidewalk and Bryan Road. And there's also a short section on Garner Road between the Vandora West subdivision that was built a few years ago and Purdue Street. And it actually may go a little beyond Purdue Street, I think. But those are just projects that are small enough that we haven't prioritized designing those yet, that we know council still wants us to do them. And then we have a number of projects that are DOT related that were not even conceived of when the bonds were passed in 2013. So the council chose to add sidewalks to Highway 401 improvements. The match for that is $83,000. At the time council approved it, no funding source beyond bonds was identified, so we made the assumption it would need to be in bonds. But now that we're going to run over the bond amount, we're suggesting to bring this back to you. The 401 sidewalks have been pushed out at least till 2022, so we think at the very earliest we would not need the funds to pay for this until late 2021. The Highway 50 bridge enhancements, which are about $300,000. These are enhancements that the council has chosen to add to the bridge, including lighting, some decorative elements on the bridge. The bridge project has been pushed out to 2027, so we believe it's safe to move the funding for that out into some future bond issuance. At last week's meeting, we talked about Lake Drive, and there was an agreement to move ahead with design and hold off on construction. So the 341 would be future construction of that. And then we had already received an estimate for betterments to the Timber 70 and Hammond Road project of about $300,000, but that project has been pushed out to beyond the horizon year of 2029. So we feel like it's very safe to unallocate any of those funds for now. So that does have about a $1.1 million of projects that council has previously committed to wanting to do, did not identify a funding source for it other than bonds. And now that we are finishing up the 2013 bonds, there's some other projects that we may need to consider more time sensitive than those DOT matching projects. Before I jump back to highlight the items in red, are there any questions anybody has about the layout of the report or anything that we've already mentioned?
Let me ask you a quick question, and it may be incorporated here somewhere. Where is the accountability for the project? I guess it would be the Vandora Springs from Timber down to Tiffany Woods?
Yes, sir.
Right down the middle?
So in the middle column here, this Vandora Springs sidewalk.
Okay. I
That
thought
is currently
might be-
estimated at $1.3 million, and that does include a recent addition for the estimate for right-of-way that we're currently working with council to help us acquire right-of-way. So while that number is subject to change once, we actually bid the work, that's the most recent estimate with right-of-way.
Okay, yeah. I thought it was there somewhere, but I wasn't sure if that was it or not. Thank you. Okay, questions for John. I'll start with Elmo. Mr. Vance, yeah.
None at the moment.
Okay, coming around.
The list of revenues under unallocated other revenues, are those all unrestricted, or are some of those restricted and some not?
They are all restricted to be used within this bond fund, with the exception of the Jones Sausage Road liquidated damages that I believe council had given us an indication you were choosing to apply against that project. But those others are restricted to be used within this bond fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Behringer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it's important to note on the Vandora Springs sidewalk, there will be a sidewalk on the east side from the fire department down to Tiffany Woods, but it'll be curb and gutter on both sides and stormwater improvements made down to Tiffany Circle on one side and Miriam Avenue on the left.
Yes, sir.
So that is improving that stretch of road, which has a lot of runoff from the water from Timber Drive. If you look at those ditches over there, they're in bad shape. So that's more than that than just a sidewalk. And then, of course, the Raleigh water line, which will be reimbursed for, that we've approved that. So there's a little bit more to the Timber Drive sidewalk, Vandora Springs sidewalk, I'm sorry, than just a sidewalk on one side.
Remind me, is that Merriman Avenue right across from
Tiffany Circle,
Tiffany
yes.
Circle?
Yes, sir.
So, and there will be curb and guttering on the other side. The
Yes, sir.
sidewalk will come on the,
From that corner from Miriam all the way up to connect to Timber Drive, yes.
good. Mr. Matthews?
Tell me about the 401 sidewalk match. I mean, just, what on 401 are you thinking about doing? I'm trying to visualize.
So the 401 Super Street project that has been approved by DOT is from, I just blanked on the name of the street at Biscuitville. No, it's just north of Trade. It's Anaron Court, thank you. From Anaron Court, where Biscuitville is on 401.
Okay.
There's a project, there's two 401 projects by DOT and they overlap, so it gets confusing. But from Anaron Court to south of Old Stage Road, that section, the funding has been approved, now deferred, but approved for the conversion to the Super Street or synchronized street section. The entirety of 401 will eventually turn into this synchronized street format. This particular project, when it was in design, DOT always approaches the town to see if there's anything we'd like to add to the project. And in this case, council wanted to add sidewalks to the eastern side of 401, I think just the eastern side of 401. So along from Lowe's Shopping Center, or just south of Lowe's, there'll be sidewalk added to that project. And whenever the municipality chooses to add something to a DOT project, there's a prearranged split of the cost. So the reason that says match there is, and I can't remember if that's an 80-20 or a 30-70, but we only pay a fraction of the cost of adding the sidewalks.
Another question. As far as next bonds, are we looking at another sidewalk bond? I know I'm getting a little ahead maybe here, but, and I'll go ahead and lay it out, with all the growth that's going on now, especially on Buffalo Road all the way up to the circle. You know where this is coming?
We got you, because we have beat this horse, Mr. Matthews,
from Pine
many
Winds to
times, don't worry.
Then we've got the three major subdivisions, all these people.
Oh, yeah.
My phone's ringing, we're paying our taxes, how come we don't get a sidewalk up to
Yes,
the
sir.
lake?
So
And,
the way council approached sidewalks in the 13 bonds is that council had a couple of specific ones, and then on top of that said, and we'd like to spend X amount on sidewalks. And so we took the named ones, some of them on the left over here were named specifically, like the Benson Main Street sidewalks, the Jessup Drive project. Buffalo Road were named projects. And then we took the amount of money that council said allocate towards sidewalks, and we went through the transportation plan, and that probably didn't need reprioritizing at the time, but it went through a prioritization of the sidewalk list there, and then got council approval as to what order to build them in until the money ran out. So what staff is doing now that we've mentioned to you recently is staff is going through the current transportation plan, editing out any sidewalks that are in the list that have been completed or maybe no longer otherwise needed for whatever reason. And we'll be bringing back to you a list of the remaining sidewalks for a discussion probably in the January timeframe for council to go through and share some prioritization with us. So you don't have to, you wouldn't have to decide on exactly which ones that at that time, but another approach would be any specific projects plus any amount of money you wanted to allocate out of the bond. We could then have several more months to work through which ones they specifically were.
Well, I'd sure like to see Buffalo Road discussed at that meeting. That would be good.
Okay.
And it's been ongoing for a long time, but all the developments out there, all the way Pine Winds to the roundabout, and we're talking about taking up to Tiffany, and I agree that needs to be done there, but that would completely close that entire loop. And all those housing developments in there, from the landings to Mead to all that Lake Moore and Pine Winds, the new developments going in, and they've got it on that side of the road. I don't know if, the sidewalk's already started there, so we've got gaps, but
What you may want to do, Mr. Matthews, is, and I'm serious, is maybe try to plan a meeting with Mr. Hodges and Royal Answer, Dixon, any of them, and just let them show you what we've got, we got 3 or 4 alternatives
Okay.
that we've looked at. The thing was the cost and how to get to the park. You go the back way, you go through Thompson Road, or do you take the bridge across the lake? And they're all expensive.
But we can still do we can still do everything along Buffalo from the roundabout to the bridge or to the last subdivision, even if we don't have a greenway connection. That could still be built as a sidewalk that would still help everyone on that side of the road get over to a greenway in the future. So you can address that as a very large, very expensive greenway project, or you can split it apart as we've previously proposed and fund the sidewalks along Buffalo, and then decide when to fund the connector to or through to the parks, possibly at a separate project, because adding those two together, the price tag got up to be about $7 million.
and I understand, and they're more interested in sidewalks at this point than greenways, because everybody else has got sidewalks, so I'll be glad to sit down and let's talk about that.
Yep.
I just don't want it to go away, and
It won't
so,
go away.
Yep.
Thank you.
We've had, how many presentations over the years, last 5 or 6 years? A half dozen presentations, 2 or 3 different
It's been a
consultants.
few of them.
Woo, and the price tag went from $750,000 in the bond to $1.5 million to $3 million, and as John said, depending on what option, you can go from $4 million to $7 million. And you'll look at it and think, where's the money go? And then you can break it down, because that's the first question I ask is, $7 million, but it's all laid out in the budget. But yes, it's on there. I fully support that 100%.
Okay.
We just got to depend on which route to do and how to do it.
that makes
I
sense.
agree. I think
can
everyone
help-
would
I can
agree.
help you with that, okay. All right,
And
that's all I got. Mr.
there's something else missing in that, just real quick, because Wake County got planned to bring the Greenway up there to, around the circle, right? And that's where the Greenway connection comes. They could connect, because they'll take it, and then that's why they want to connect to a Greenway to go to the park. So that's why we really have to kind of plan for a Greenway, because they'll bring it to us if we take it to the park. So that's another piece of the puzzle. When that'll happen, that may be years down the road.
Okay,
Yeah, but it will be nice to have that greenway connection.
and Ben, I said that sidewalk connection too.
Yeah, I know.
They're not interested in greenways, they want sidewalk, and I've represented them well, so. That's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I'll, with those questions, I will go back to, did you have
Yeah,
something else?
Yeah, just a quick question. You were gonna go back to the ones under committed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
So under committed, especially the ones outlined in red, there's specific ask of those tonight, but we did want to hit on a couple of the other things as well. New Rand Road, I think everyone's aware of that project. When, back in the August timeframe, we came to you, Mr. Johnson, and I came to you to let you know that the ditch section along the frontage of the dog park on Garner Road had not turned out as safe as we had hoped it would. The design did not translate as well, and council gave us the thumbs up to go and have a price issued for a change order. We did get that price back recently. It is $68,000, And so it has been added to this number, and later in the slides tonight, one of the action items will specifically ask for your approval to do is to just bring back that change order to you at a future, the next council meeting to approve, since it follows along the direction that you had given us. Jones Sausage Road design, I think everyone's had recent updates on that project as we've recently approved it, getting started. Main Street Streetscape, I've got some slides to show you that highlight a little more about what that project includes because it's been some time since we talked about it. White Oak, Ackerman, Hebron, this is the expected match amount for the LAP application. That is still on hold. I have not received an update from DOT, or neither has Mr. Johnson, on release of those funds. However, we did recently receive some questionnaires from Campo that lead us to believe that they're going through a prioritization exercise to figure out which projects they could release that would allow some monies to trickle out. We had to break down projected monthly expenditures on projects, so I think hopefully that is going to lead to a decision of some money getting freed up for that. The Timber Drive lap match, that project is wrapped up now. It is going through the financial closeout. We believe that this will come in as our match would be at or less than the 188 programmed here. I don't think it'll be dramatically lower, but the overall project budget was somewhat lower, so we think our share with that will be a little bit less. We just talked about Vandora Springs sidewalk. Lake Drive, when we were here last week talking about Lake, council gave us the authorization to move forward to complete design. What we did not clarify with you when we were here was that the next stage of that the agenda cover said it, but we didn't verbalize it to you, that Mr. Johnson was envisioning design and right-of-way because most of the design work that you verbally approved actually includes right-of-way acquisition as well. So we wanted to confirm tonight that that could be the completing the design work and the right-of-way acquisition, which would be at the 188 amount, and then the construction, as we mentioned earlier, would move down to some other future funding or some other funding source.
That's a question. The gentleman that spoke at the end about the house that he owns being affected, does he actually live there or is he the landlord?
I do not believe that he lives there.
Right, that's what I thought.
And he has had several conversations with Mr. Johnson since then, and they are working on some alternatives to try to hopefully meet some of the concerns that he had about that. 540 betterments, this is one of the more recent, more time-sensitive things that we wanted to bring to you tonight. Council authorized the addition of greenway and sidewalk crossings at Highway 50 in the design of 540 and also at Old Stage Road. So at Highway 50, this includes our cost share of sidewalks on both sides of the road, and at Old Stage Road, it's sidewalk on one side and multi-use path on the other in keeping with our future greenway plan. Council authorized us to move forward with that. We've gone through the agreement process with DOT, and our cost share, as we knew it would be, is $154,617. We've received the invoice from that, and it's payable now and due at the end of December. So that's one of the things that we wanted to bring back to you to show you something that has taken some precedent in funding, in recommending, and unless you wanted to choose to fund it some other way, it was a timely thing to be funded from the bonds. And then we've also got another new opportunity that I'll show you some graphics on for Pearl and Parker Streets. So before I jump to Main Street Streetscape and Pearl and Parker, any other questions about any of the other projects under committed?
A question. We talk about this in the future. Is it going to be included with street improvements and street projects? Are we bundling sidewalks and streets again, or are they going to be separated?
I believe that bond counsel will tell you that it would most commonly be street and sidewalk improvements would be in the same bond category, just because they are of like types.
So my question sort of is, when we look at those road improvements, and I know there have been plans that have been there for a while, but when we start looking at that 50 corridor, now that we have that veterans project coming in, so there are major improvements that need to be done. I know it's out of our hands, it's a DOT, but in listening to some of the other presenters that have come, there are ways we can accelerate some of that stuff. So I guess I'm curious about that corridor. What's the distance from, is that Rand Road there, New Rand? Rand down to 540. What's the distance from there to there?
I don't have a measurement in my head right now. I'm not sure how far that will be.
I'm just thinking about that corridor, and if there's any way in our bond planning and conversations we have with DOT that we can accelerate the improvement of that corridor all the way down to 540, it'd be great for all the development down that way. And also the amount of traffic that's eventually want to go to that clinic from eastern North Carolina, from southern parts of everywhere, that ease of access and mass transit buses and things like that. I don't know, just as we talk through bond and allocating funds, and I think that corridor is more important than ever, actually.
So we will definitely be working with Campo and DOT. We're already discussing with DOT because of the project announcement, what could happen. And while it will be critical to get the corridor from the facility to 540, that happens to be a segment of 50 that is way under capacity currently. And so the challenge is deciding where, if you were to invest, where would you invest? Because Rand North is actually the segment that is over capacity. So there's sort of a, which one do you try to help tackle? But yes, it's on our radar. We know that it would be something council wants to follow up and have some strategic discussions on in the future.
If maybe to add to that, in the last TIP, the DOT broke down improving 50 from Cleveland School Road to Rand Road and Rand Road to Timber. One was 43 million, one was 42 million. So it's pricey, and traffic counts, the last ones we had, 7,000 cars a day go on and off at Rand Road. So 7,000 cars, that's what, as Mr. Hodges said, once you get past Rand Road is the issue. I'm going to make the assumption, and this happens when you assume, that with the announcement of this facility, that's going to be a major improvement at that intersection where the stoplight is. I mean, you're going to have to see something substantial there and in front of the property. So that's going to help there. Damien raised a good point because my wife asked me the same question about going to 540. But we also have to remember that once 40 is complete, a lot of traffic has jumped from 40 to 50 because of construction. When the 40 finally gets open, that's going to be a relief off of 50, as will 540 eventually. But when 40 gets complete, it's going to take some of that traffic off 50. But it's a good point. It's just a very expensive point.
Yep.
Yes.
And 540 and the facility would likely open similar timeframes, so we're hopeful that there's some correlation that we can start making with those.
Let's hope they're in a very similar time frame.
All right, if there's no other questions on this sheet, I'm going to jump ahead to two specific projects that we wanted to get on your radar tonight. One is Pearl and Parker Streets. So I'm going to jump ahead to our map here. This is Main Street. The yellow are town-controlled properties. This is the depot site. Pearl Street runs here, and this is an unimproved dirt section of Pearl. And then Parker Street connects Pearl Street over to Montague, which has been improved as a part of the rec center project. So what we're talking about tonight is the area with the green highlight here. There is a development project that's going to be coming to council soon that would be for this parcel along Pearl Street and this parcel at the corner of Parker and Pearl. When the town approved its depot plan, the classification for the project there did not require us to improve our half of the frontage of that property at that time because it was a minor expansion of the use. But I think council all recognize that at some point in time, the town would have to improve its half of Pearl Street. With this improvement or the development across the street coming, we felt like it was appropriate to bring to council the opportunity for us to partner with the developer and enter into some type of development agreement whereby we would jointly design and build the entirety of Pearl Street and the entirety of Parker Street, and we would have an agreement in which we paid for the portions that were the town's and the developer paid for the portions that were the developers. Along Pearl Street, there's a couple of unique situations. We would be improving the street along the frontage of the baseball facility. And if you chose not to do that, we could leave that as a half unfinished, but that it's going to look half unfinished. Similarly, on Parker Street, the developer would be required to build half of the cross section for about half of the street, and then the town owns the proximate other half. On the other side, the developer would have to build their half of about a third of the street. The Lions Club owns a small portion, and then there's a lot here that the town is working with the owner on future ownership of. So a significant portion of Parker that is not owned by the developer is owned by the town. And so one of the opportunities, like I said, we wanted to bring to council was, while this is being done, let's not mess the street up twice. Work with the private development agreement to be able to do these at the same time. And then staff would recommend that to not leave gaps in the street, that we would go ahead and do the entirety of both of those streets.
Makes sense to
ma'am.
me. Go ahead, yeah.
When you extend Pearl Street, does it end in the back of the FastMed property, or exactly where does it?
So it ends currently right here at the back of the FastMed property, but this is dirt
Right.
and is only accessing one rental property that's at the back of this lot.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to where it stops.
It stops here, the dirt does, but as you see, there is an easement that goes over behind the FastMed property to the women's club.
Okay.
So whether there's something on top of that easement at the moment, I can't tell you, but I think there's a chain across it. But we would probably stop the improvements at this point, but knowing that for future development opportunities,
Yeah.
we've even talked to the owners of the property that own the FastMed building about future redevelopment opportunities and how this would give them an access point to allow for a higher density redevelopment along Highway 70 without having to ask for an additional driveway cut, which would not likely be granted by DOT.
I have a question, like, given the nature of downtown streets, what's the full set of these improvements? What's the final improvement look like as far as curb gutter width and?
Across the,
Chris, can you hear us, that question? The
Yes,
question
sir.
was
How you doing?
the cross-section of Pearl and Parker.
Yeah, it's typically, I believe we got, both of them would be 29-foot back-to-back of curb, plus like a 10-foot berm for sidewalk. So it'd be like typically 5 feet of grass, 5 foot of sidewalk, and then a foot or two of grass behind the sidewalk.
All right. And then you may have noticed a number back in this. We had estimated these orange numbers are ones that we need to do some additional work on, but Mr. Johnson has done some work, and he believes that the town's portion of these improvements would be in the $355,000 range. Now, however, that is very preliminary numbers, so we would know that that might be somewhat more when we actually got into design of that. Anything else on Parker and Pearl?
Is it the proposal for the funding of that to come out of that balance of unallocated other revenues?
Yes, sir. So on that sheet, this 355 is in this column, which puts it as being proposed to be handled out of these dollars.
All right, what's next? I've got to go ahead with this.
Okay, the other project we wanted to revisit with you was Main Street and Ram Mill improvements. It's been some time since we talked about this with the previous council members and the existing council members. I'm not sure we've had a discussion with this before. This project was originally included in the bond to do some streetscape improvements along Main Street, to do a speed table at the opening of Rand Mill and Main, to make improvements along Rand Mill to this parking lot that is owned by the town that is currently gravel. It included the curb and gutter around these two buildings to provide a more safe pedestrian access as well as protecting the buildings. It also included some stormwater management by the use of rain garden plantings that you see here over on the right. And it included a dumpster that we've received some state grant funding for. The dumpster is being proposed to solve a trash issue that we have with a number of rollout carts that are being used by businesses. This is one small section of town where we provide trash pickup because of the unique geography of the area there. So that was the original proposal for the project. When the town was able to purchase this property that is just south of the town's gravel parking lot, we came back and worked with our designers to look at what it would look like if we combined the two together into a parking lot that would net us about 59 parking spaces. The price tag for this project was fairly high. It brought the total budget up to about 1.2 or 1.3 million, largely because this grade goes down into a ravine behind this lot, and we were going to have to use some underground sand filtering for stormwater controls. So it brought the project budget up fairly significantly. Council, upon the recommendation of the Public Works Committee, reviewed this and recommended that we go back to the original scope, including some stormwater, some drainage issues that we have coming from town-owned property to the east, and ending our improvements along this area. The price does not include paving of the existing gravel parking lot. So the $600,000 proposed right now would at least get those improvements done here. One of the reasons we wanted to check in with you about this tonight is there's some substantial redevelopment happening along Ram Mill Road. There's a rezoning case that'll be coming to you soon, and some work that is being done in advance of that, some speculative remodeling being done to the two Alco cabinet buildings. So some fairly significant investment being made there, as well as some buildings on Main Street that are being renovated currently. And so we believe that this project would be an asset to doing at this time. Also, as we go out to bid on the property for the DFI engagement, which is this corner, although this is the outline of the old buildings that used to sit there years ago, it would be good timing to be able to have that project and possibly coordinate some of this work with this developer if we were able to do that. So this slide really just summarized that as well. So summarizing here, what we mentioned tonight was adding the 540 betterments and the Pearl and Parker Streets to the current bond, moving to the next bond or some future funding source, sidewalk connectors, and then the three matching funds for DOT projects and the Lake Drive construction, which is related to a DOT project being the bridge. And then if council chooses to authorize us to, the next steps that we could move forward with would be the Garner Road widening, a part of the New Rand Road project. We would bring that change order back to you at the consent agenda at the next meeting on the 7th. If you authorize us to move forward with Pearl and Parker Streets, we would begin working on a development agreement with the developer, who is verbally committed to working with us on this initiative. And if you chose for us to move forward with it, we would go back for the Main Street and Ram Mill improvements and revisit that scope and estimate, because it has been some time since we did that, and then see if there's a coordination we can make with the developer along that property as well. That's all I had.
Okay,
I'll be glad
Mr.
to answer
Hodges,
questions. And then Mr. Singleton said he had.
Council, further questions on both the presentation and the next steps? I'll start with Mr. Matthews here.
Not right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Singleton?
I hate to be the fussy butt about this, but I'm gonna be a fussy butt about this. The Parker and Pearl Streets were not talked about. First time I heard it was tonight. We talked about these sidewalk connectors for 5 years. 2 of them in particular, we told people we were gonna make a connection. One that's not very long, and the one from the Y down to the name escapes me all of a sudden, the street. Right down there, it's excuse me, Summers Walk.
Zinnia.
Yeah, Zinnia, very small, not very, I've seen people walk on the grass there, it's not safe, you got the trees out there, it's just narrow. The second one is, we told the people over there on Purdue Street, we were gonna connect up at where the Vandor West came out, so they'd have a sidewalk to go down there that goes about halfway down that block, down to where the corner of Weston Road is and the gas station, repair station. Sidewalk stops in that parking lot. There's no sidewalk. There's curb and gutter there, but there's no sidewalk, but there's a goat path where it's worn. And we've been talking about that for years, and I hate to be a fussy butt, but that's what we told them we were gonna do, and I don't feel like putting that off 5 more years for people to have to do that. That's just, it's on part of Garner Road, and to me, you gotta put curb and gutter on the stretch where Vandor West ended to Purdue Street, and then sidewalk there. The other has curb and gutter there, you just had to put the sidewalk. The third one is on Bryan Road, as John mentioned. We talked about going down to Ackerman. I can, since the middle school's not there yet, I can kind of wait on that one. These other 2, I mean, if we can spend $25,000 on this crosswalk, to be sure we can do that little section of sidewalk. And again, we should prioritize doing that sidewalk stretch, because that's what we told the people on Purdue Street we were gonna do. And again, all you got to do is see the goat path, people walk on it. So I'm just not gonna be a fussy butt, not trying to be ugly about what she presented, but they to me need to be done. And I know you got we don't know the numbers, 100,000 may be way short, it may be and that's for the three of them, but that's the two of the three I would wish we would strongly consider doing. The curb and gutters also on Amesboro Road. You do have to cut some landscaping that's gotta be redone. But anyway, I wish we could get estimates on that.
Okay, we will get to work.
Okay, Mr. Singleton, yes, I'll go to Ms. Behringer.
I would agree with Mr. Singleton about the from Bandora West over to Purdue Street. That needs to be done. We need to work that in, make it a priority, and just see how we can change it around so that we can get that.
Okay, Mr. Tellinger.
I would agree with that. I do want to go back to this Rand Mill improvement. Can you go back to that slide?
Yes, sir.
I understand this has been probably in the works for a while or talked about for a while, but the RFP we have out right now for that tabletop parking project in the 3 or 4 story building we're gonna spend $1 million some on adding parking there as part of that parking deck. This property to me seems like we should wait to see how this project goes over here and how well we do that RFP process. Because to use this land right now in the heart of downtown, just for a flat parking lot, when you could probably come in later, do another RFP. They do it everywhere. They put the decks under the bottom level, 2 or 3 levels, do an RFP for another 2 or 3 story building behind there or something, unless
Yep.
there are some.
So we're not proposing the parking. I'm sorry, this is just the graphic that had all of it on there. The parking was, the council had directed us not to move forward with the parking. All we were looking for was the streetscape improvements, all of this work that would clear up some drainage issues and access issues up to this gravel parking lot, but not paving the parking lot or developing this.
Okay, so the parking is not in the
No, sir.
works
That was
at
what
all.
brought it to 1.3 million to do the 2 parking lots. This would not
Okay.
include parking.
That was not clear.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm sorry, using this graphic probably could be very
It was
confusing.
not clear, but thank you.
I was trying to capture the history and move forward, and
I
sorry.
got
that-
you.
So it would be
Streetscape.
really stopping about here. It would be handling some drainage issues that are pretty bad, dumpster, and all of this work.
Thank you.
But I believe, to touch on what Mr. Dellinger said, I believe there would be, have to be some paving associated with the dumpster, with the weight, other than that, so there would be some paving associated with the
We have
dumpster.
to build a standard dumpster pad and
Right.
enclosure, but we would not be paving the parking lot.
But you'd have to pull out where the truck goes. Usually dumpsters aren't working, dumpsters aren't doing on gravel anymore because of the ruts they create. So there would have to be some concrete put out there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just want everyone to know that, so slightly past that line, but it's directly related to the dumpster.
Yes, sir. It would not be paving any parking spaces, maybe a clearer way to say that.
There you go, that's good.
So it's really just the dumpster and around all the way to the other side of Main Street,
Yes, sir.
and none of that parking at all.
None of that parking at all. And this parking lot is gravel as it currently is, and this open land here.
Gotcha.
I believe you will see a request from the folks across the street that may propose wanting to have a shared use for using that just as open space to supplement their event facility. That may come to you at some point, but we would not recommend making any improvements to this lot right now.
And are there any other improvements down Random Mill related to what they're doing that are either that they're contributing or that we're?
They would be,
Participating.
when they bring their site plan to you, I
Okay.
believe it will have to include improvements to Rand Mill Road down past their second warehouse here.
Gotcha.
We've worked with them on a cross-section that we think is appropriate for a dead-end, basically a dead-end alley that we are sort of reclassifying to support the downtown environment to be appropriate for there. And also, Mr. Dellinger, something that we can pull back out and discuss at a future time. We actually did an iteration of this with a building sitting here.
Okay.
So
I've
we
not
can
seen that
we can
before.
show you those. I didn't bring it tonight because we hadn't moved forward with it. And also, it brings back in the challenge of if you build the building, where would the parking go if you don't build parking? So that's another ongoing problem. But we do have renderings of this that actually looked at an infill building as one of the options.
Thank you.
Let me go to Mr. Vance.
Yes, just, can you go back to the final sheet you have with the list
Yes, sir.
in reference to the Pearl and Parker Streets improvements in conjunction with the development that's currently being proposed? The developer wants to start do you have an idea of the timeframe the developer wants to start with that?
I believe that Planning Commission will hear their case in December, and you will get it in January, I believe. So I know this is a little out of order, but I also know that Mr. Johnson and staff also did not want us to get behind a situation where we couldn't participate if council chose to move forward. Once they have that approval, it would likely take some months to be able to get things ready to start development. So an option for any of these could be, if you chose to move forward with them, and I'll get Mr. Beck to come speak to this if you care to, there is an opportunity to reimburse yourself within a certain amount of time for improvements made for projects that qualify for a bond that's passed. So if you were to have a bond referendum in 2021 and you needed some of the funds a little before that, if the bond referendum passed, there is a function in which you could reimburse the funds that you used for the qualifying project from the bond proceeds.
Okay.
So if you wanted to wait, if you were in agreement that we want to go ahead and work with the developer to do a development agreement and not miss the opportunity, we don't have to say tonight it will only come from this existing bond fund. It would just be council committing to say we should do this while the road's being redone, and when we get around to the dollars, we'll revisit where the dollars come from at that time.
Okay.
Okay, you
Good.
good?
Follow-up question on that.
Yeah, we'll go a second round.
The improvements for that project for Pearl and Parker, I know when you have other subdivisions on other streets, they're required to do the improvements. Are they not required downtown already to do those improvements, or are we doing something different?
Yes, sir. So let me make sure that I was clear on this as well. The developer will be building their half of the ultimate cross-section of Pearl. Their half of, well, it's both sides right here, and then their half to right here. So what we are talking about is only the town participating to, at the same time, do the improvements that the town needs to do for the depot park, clean up in front of the Pearl Street building. It would be doing a little bit of speculative work, possibly, depending on how you design it, along the frontage of the ball fields, and then it would allow the town to go ahead and do their few improvements to this section that it owns and the section across the street that it will likely own. So it is only the town's half.
It's a timing. I got
Right,
it. Okay.
and that's why we're bringing it to you tonight. It's just that development's about to come before you, and we wanted you to know that there's an opportunity to do the street in full as the developer's going versus doing half of it. And
Have one contractor do it.
Exactly. Do it all.
One or the other will have a development agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other follow-ups by anybody? Greg?
I'll just mention on the Rand Mill Road, 2.5 years ago, Public Works with me, Mr. Kennedy, we met with Maury out there and some staff and talked about some things. And one of the concerns they had was these beds up here at the front of the entrance into Rand Mill are stormwater devices because they have issues with the water sheeting and going down Rand Mill Road, and also at the back of that building, I believe, where the salon is. And this would help to alleviate some of those stormwater issues with that water running off Main Street and sheeting down there. This would help address that issue pretty much. So that's why those raised landscape beds are out there. That's a stormwater device.
Yes, sir.
On both sides.
And there's also, for anybody not familiar with the grade, so this is the eastern block of the 100 Main Street block. The town has a sewer easement for City of Raleigh sewer that goes about 2/3 the way down, not quite to our own building we have at the end. But this is also a grade challenge that dumps stormwater sheets off and runs down the hill and causes some issues right out here. So earlier, when I mentioned stormwater, one of the things Public Works Committee recommended was going ahead and addressing the stormwater issues back there as best as you could do while still having a gravel parking lot. And we can make use of some of the grade of this parking lot, which goes downhill, to daylight out some stormwater until such time that we might choose to come back and resurface this parking lot one day in the future. So we think is a viable way to handle the stormwater concerns even without doing the parking improvements that you see here today.
And one question, where will this water go? Is there a basin proposed?
So some of the stormwater will go into a system that's already in the street here, Mr. Vance.
Okay.
Some of it that would be coming down here would actually daylight out down in this area to there's a natural ravine there that some of that could daylight into. Main Street has a pretty significant ravine that runs all the way out to Highway 70, running behind the buildings on Rand Mill and behind the homes on Purvis Street.
That's when we could build the parking deck Mr. Dellinger was referencing over the Rosine, and how we can get more parking down there. Use the lay of the land, hey,
Sir.
I'm saying, hey, look, if they can put 2 parking decks in Blowing Rock of all places and use the lay of the land, we can do it in Garner.
Okay,
So I'm happy to answer your other questions, and then we would like to just get any guidance you have on moving forward with these 3 initiatives tonight. And as I mentioned before, the final decision on exactly where to pull Pearl Street funding does not have to happen tonight. We can just get further along, and depending on timing, it could be that if you choose to move forward with it, it could be out of either fund balance or it could be reimbursement from future bonds, and that would let us go back and tackle the sidewalk connectors that Mr. Singleton mentioned.
Question, the Garner Road widening that you mentioned on here, is that just the section that you wrote to us tonight about in front of the dog park? I know we've made improvements with that sidewalk on the north side. There are no improvements to be made to the south side on the
No,
Garner
sir.
Road?
This
Right.
is just, we called it widening. It'd probably been better to put storm drain as the name of it. We're filling that ditch with pipe.
Right.
DOT allowed us to connect a pipe that they told us during design they wouldn't allow us to connect. And by doing that, we will widen the road over that to the same width as it is right in front of Chadwick and the church that we recently did.
So it's a stormwater thing that we've been talking about.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's just that ditch that turned out much steeper than everybody wanted by pedestrian access.
Yes. Okay.
And again, Mr. Johnson worked with DOT and got an answer that was previously no turned into a yes, so that we could go back and connect that system.
okay, so I believe, Mr. Hodges, you're asking council to confirm what is listed under next steps here as the 3 items there, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, certainly seems reasonable to me. What's your pleasure, council? I think there's general agreement on that.
I think we should, yes, sir.
Okay.
All
Give me
right,
a-
I
give
didn't
me a-
introduce her, but thanks to Ms. Howell for being here tonight in case there were any questions that came up about
Okay,
downtown.
yeah, anything she needs to add. Okay, a thumbs up on that from council?
Okay, thank you very much.
Question unrelated to this, but when do we expect New Rand Road the work on New Rand Road to be finished in front of the ice house?
Yeah, it will still be some time. If Mr. Johnson heard that, Ms. Behringer was asking for a status update on the New Rand Road project. Can you give that to us tonight?
The best of my knowledge, the total project will be completed next spring, probably March, April. They may be able to complete a little bit of paving. It really is going to depend on how the weather is in December and January. Obviously, DOT has restrictions after December 15th. And so as long as we've got really warm weather, they might be able to get down some curb and some paving along there, but it won't be the finished final level of asphalt. They'll probably leave it a little bit low, but the widening should be well on its way at that point. Basically, next week, we're starting storm drainage installation. They're now complete with both water and sanitary sewer on that block. So they'll move into storm drainage next, and then as soon as the storm drainage is complete, you'll start seeing the curb and the paving coming through.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodges. Fun stuff. Okay, I believe we're at item 3. Town manager is going to lead these next sessions here. Mr. Dickerson.
If I, yes, Mayor, Town Council, we've had several discussions over the last few months about retreats and, how we did the council retreat a little different than we had in the past because we had a few things to queue up in front of you. that range anywhere from the CIP to lines of business, some of the bond discussions and those type of things. So we had spread out some of the meetings, but I know there was a desire to get back to doing a traditional retreat, so just wanted to have some discussion around that. We typically would have those in the February, late February, mid to late February, sometimes early into March, depending on the scheduling, the venue, and schedules and those type of things. So just wanted to kind of get a feel for, your thoughts on that, and then talk about subject matter a little bit. One of the things I had in mind, and one of the things we had talked about queuing up was the strategic plan. And for that to be a successful plan, I think as a new council, we'd want to have some exercises surrounding visioning and just kind of recalibrating or reaffirming what the council's vision is as far as the town, the growth. We have our vision statements within the strategic plan that deal with fiscal responsibility, quality of life, orderly growth, and what's the other? Is what? Yeah, service delivery. Service delivery is the other one. So just around those four kind of vision statements and the objectives and things that go along with that, we want to, just confirm what your vision is as a new council, and then take that, and that would give the staff the opportunity to take that and make sure that our long-range plans, make sure the strategic plan, and some of the other initiatives that we're putting forth in our daily tasks are in line with what the council vision is. So that could be one of the major focuses of a retreat. And we typically have a 2-day retreat. And so we could talk about that, whether, this year we just did 1 year. Not sure, how we would want to do that right now with the COVID-19. Typically a retreat's going to work better if we do it in person, with the interaction, and we'd have to try to, see what the situation is with facilitators and those type of things, and depending on what the subject matter is. So just kind of want to get your thoughts around that visioning piece and your desire to have a traditional retreat as we have in the past.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dixon, and he and I have had some discussions about this as it relates to the timing and so forth, and I know there has been some suggestion that we move it back to the February timeframe, and certainly strategic visioning, I think, is an important topic, and one that would be timely for this. But I'll give council an opportunity to weigh in on this as well. So let me start with Mr. Vance down here.
And we're looking at targeting February?
Likely mid to late February.
What 2-day retreat? I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that we need to do and in looking at the retreat, is it possible to look at what was proposed at the previous retreat to see if we reach those objectives or those goals that were established for the previous retreat we had?
Yes, that's typically one of the ways we start a retreat, is by looking at goals from the previous one and just kind of seeing where we are with that. So yeah, that could certainly be an exercise.
And is that I'm assuming that information is given to us well prior to this retreat even starting, so we can study up on those.
Yeah, we can look at those and just kind of give you an update on the accomplishments since the last retreat, where we are.
Okay, and when you say 2-day retreat, is it 8 full hours, consecutive days?
The first day is typically 8 hours, and the second day could go up to 6 to 8 hours, depending on the amount of subject matter and the different topics that we may talk about.
Yeah. We usually probably finish the second day with less than 8 hours. That's been my recall, but it is designed for 2 8-hour sessions.
It's, in my opinion, it's much more effective when we do have them for 2 days rather than spread it out, because it's just, we're focused on that topic or that exercise. If we spread it out, it's easy to feel disjointed, to feel like did you finish this, or did we not, or did we go on to do we go on to the next thing, and how do we get circle back? I think it just is much more efficient when we do it 2 days in a row.
Okay,
So,
okay.
that's it.
Mr. Tellinger?
My only question about the time frame of February is where are we and where would we be in the cycle of bond discussions and the budget for the next year?
The staff would be composing their budgets. They wouldn't be, turned in yet. We're close to being turned in by the end of February, but there'll still be some time to tweak some things. The bond discussion would be something we could possibly talk about during the retreat.
I just want to
Could
make
be
sure it's not
something for the next day.
whatever strategic visioning and shifting we do at that time is still in line with the time frame we want to move forward, and we're not already committing to things before we're having this opportunity to speak together. So as long as it doesn't impede that process, or we need those
Yeah, one of the
timeframes
things we
on it.
could use the retreat for is to kind of confirm what some of the bond projects would be. And some prioritization, because we're getting to the point where we got to start making some commitments and trying to figure out what those dollar amounts are going to be for each bond question.
I just want to make sure, I mean, we're already talking about bond projects, so I think we'll continue to through December and January. I just don't make sure we don't get into a strategic planning discussion and then all of a sudden say, we actually need to be doing this after we've had a chance to have that conversation, and then say, well, it's too late or something like that. So I just want to make sure that if it's earlier in February so that we can
Yeah, the
still
plan
stay on
is,
track for the bond, that's preferable than, I just don't want us to get too far down
the plan is maybe in the January timeframe, January work session is to talk about some of the CIP items and then confirming that, because the CIP, a lot of those items will become your bond projects, and so we can.
I guess
firm on
that's
that,
kind of
so.
what my sort of concern is that we're committing to CIP and bond things before we're having the strategic discussion, because you want to have that strategic discussion can have significant impacts on your prioritization of
Yeah,
capital improvement projects, so.
There'll be plenty of time to tweak
Okay.
it or change it, but we don't want to wait too late before
Right,
we
that's
have those
okay.
in-depth discussions about what could possibly be in and what we want to put off to a later bond.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have leeway if we have some epiphany in the middle of a strategic conversation that we can say, we need $10 million for this, and we can still have, make those adjustments. Is that, I mean, I just want to look, read the room and see if that's a possibility. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Can I be a smart aleck and say, if you have that
Yes.
kind of epiphany, we'll send you outside to think it over before you bring it
No.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
From the discussions we've had over the last few months, we kind of have some ballpark of where you want to be with
Yeah.
some projects. I mean, even what we talked about tonight.
Yep.
So we don't see it being a wholesale change, so.
Right,
but
right, yep.
There'll be places where we can tweak it if we need to.
Okay.
But we got to start getting to the point where we're putting, the projects together and the cost and coming up with some of those variables. So, yeah.
Okay, Ms. Behringer?
Yes, I just want to add to Mr. Vance's point. I think that it would be good that we need to revisit last year's retreat and to see if we finished what we started or we're satisfied with that, if there are any loose ends, and include that as part of the retreat that we're planning.
Okay.
If I may, one of the things that we did, we went back to the facilitator's summary from the retreat in July, and one of the specific to-dos was to have this visioning session in the winter of 2020, and so that's one of the, so we're attempting to fulfill those as scheduled out from that, but we can provide you more detail on what the outcome of that was.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Singleton. Chance to weigh in.
I agree with what Ms. Benger talked about. If you're gonna have if it's gonna be a day or day and a half or whatever, that you're right to have it back to back instead of splitting it. While it's on your mind, you can go back and touch things. So, And we're looking, you think right now, Rodney, you're talking about sometime, a date we can agree on in February, that's what you're shooting for?
That's typically the time frame we
Yeah,
have it. I think we
yeah.
have had it as late as early March, but it just depends on scheduling.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we want to try to get it done, before we get too far in budget and too far in bond discussion and those type of things.
Okay, okay.
I agree with the February, and I like the back-to-back thing too, because what's fresh on your mind, you can go ahead and move forward. Two more things. One, what would be for a bond, what is our drop dead date to get things together for a bond for next year? What day do we need to have everything ready by?
Yeah, I think we're looking at May 2021 in that time frame, to kind of get the questions together and a decision on what we want to allocate to each,
For a fall bond?
yes, referendum.
Oh, yeah, okay. So May would be the timeline. So I guess the reason I'm saying that is with this, in February, we're going to be discussing those bond items. So those things we like, we still can get them in on time and deal with, okay. And one of my favorites, where are we going to have this thing at? And
We don't know yet,
don't say the
so I'll need to go
auditorium
back
again.
and look at the date, look at venues, and just talk about, what method we're going to use to have it.
I think Mr. Matthews, it's a nice way of requesting.
He doesn't
us to
want
have
it at the
auditorium on the
auditorium.
stage.
Not at the auditorium.
There
The
you go.
sound and the AC,
There you
yeah,
go.
issue, so.
That's a nice way of saying that.
Thank you, sir, I appreciate that, appreciate
Well,
your
we
support.
had,
With a request like that.
If we have it someplace else and he still has that same problem, then we have to look at something else.
Oh, I'll be
okay,
fine
yeah.
anywhere else.
Are you finished? Yeah.
That's got it, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Yeah.
Matthew, one of the things just to add to your point, though, keep in mind, though, that there are decisions that council can make along the way between now and before the retreat or after the retreat that determines the amount of dollars that are going to be allocated to big, broad buckets like road projects, sidewalk projects, new parks, park enhancements. And so then from there, if there are projects that don't necessarily have to be named out on the materials, the educational materials produced by the town, some of those decisions can happen beyond May. But by May, for example, we might need to decide of the bonds, we're going to have 1 million in sidewalks. And unless there's a specific one that you feel is important to name for the voters' benefit, we don't have to have a final decision on the prioritization of all of them and which one's which. You may choose to voter support, but the big broad buckets is the kind of things that plus any named projects would be what we.
Okay, thank you, okay.
When can we expect to have like that broad brush list of buckets and, as we work with staff, like in December, sort of like just sketch like 20 million for this, 30 million for this, 20 million for this. When can we sort of start to have a feel for, I know we haven't had a specific amount or where it's allocated, but when are we going to start to chisel that down?
Mike's going to come up and address that. And I think we've given you some of that in pieces, but
Yeah, that's.
you want to see it in one.
Yeah, I mean, the broad buckets, we kind of tried to talk about, I'm not remembering exactly when it was, but with Davenport, so like the parks category is the parks bucket and the street and sidewalks. So those are kind of your broad buckets, but we are planning on finalizing the recommended CIP based on the guidance that we got that night, providing it to you hopefully in the December timeframe, and then having an additional conversation in January. At least that was the original plan, to try to refine it in addition and to see you have it. But that's the way I would lay it out broadly, is the things that are funded in the CIP are based on the category. Those are the buckets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I just noted that all those aren't necessarily covered by the bond, so then it's kind of figuring out which goes to bond, which comes out of paying out of some other
Correct.
mechanism, so, okay.
Yeah.
It'd be good, just having all that conversation, put all those pieces together at one time again. I think we're getting close to that, so, okay, that works.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe everybody had a chance, Mr.
One
Singleton.
thing
go
to
ahead.
touch on that, Mr. Hodges mentioned about the buckets is last time, we talked about specific projects, and we've done most of them. But one good example of one is we set aside $3 million to widen Highway 50 from 40 Highway 70 from I-40 to 50. It was widened 70 from 40 to 50. Well, once we found out the state was going to be redoing the bridge and the state was going to widen 70 one day, we didn't need that $3 million for that. So we took the $3 million, and that is other projects. General Sausage Road, the plans came from that. So we have to remember that just because we start talking about something, another priority may come in there, or the state comes in, and there's no need for us to plan on widening 70 until they get both the Van Dorn Springs and Highway 50 bridges wide. And now we know they're put off a year, so we took that money and reallocated it. So we always have to remember that, except for Mr. Matthews sidewalk project, which is definitely going to be funded, how those things can change. So.
It's in sidewalks.
And if I could add, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Singleton's point, one lesson we learned last time was by naming so many specific projects, we left ourselves without the flexibility to, if we had known more about the LAP program at the time, we left ourselves without the flexibility to submit a LAP application for the project that would score the best. And so that's one thing we've mentioned to you when Campo was here was, let's think about a way to structure those buckets of dollars and name strategic things that will appeal to voters, but allow ourselves the flexibility to work as creatively and strategically as we can with entities like Campo to maximize those returns from others' dollars.
Thank you. Yes, that's a point well made. I think, we learn from each one of these bond processes here, and hopefully we'll get it right next. Well, we've gotten it right. The citizens certainly have supported those, and I appreciate that. But, I think we've benefited from our past experience, and will in the future, okay? Okay, anything else, Mr. Manager, on that issue? Otherwise, we'll move to the next item.
That's it on that.
Okay. Item 4.
And then item 4 is information purposes, routine report on the agenda, pending agenda, and items that are coming before you over the next couple of months. Since we're not going to have a work session in December, we went ahead and gave you the December meeting possibilities as well as the January list. And my usual caveat is subject to change.
Yeah, right, always. Okay. Council, you have those before you, probably already reviewed them, I suspect. Any questions for the manager or assistant managers on that issue?
And I know, John, you had talked about that project at Pearl and Parker, but I don't see it on the December or January list, so probably later.
I may be a
little
month
bit later.
off with that,
Yeah,
but in the
okay, I
near
just wanted
future,
to-
it'll come forward. So I'm
Yeah, I
sorry
just
if I
wanted to make
misspoke
sure.
which month it was.
Okay.
I have a question. The fee in lieu for the parks, I just want to make sure we get that on the agenda for December at some point, that second reading or last reading or whichever reading.
I'm not sure how many we're up to now, but yes. That probably wasn't, when we originally pulled the pending agenda, we probably were still operating under the assumption that we were done with that, but
Okay.
it will be on a December agenda,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. I have another question, Mr. Mayor, just in regards to, it was kind of during council reports, but with regards to COVID and the restrictions and the direction we're going. Back in March, we had an emergency meeting because it was starting to get bad, and on a Sunday of all days. The governor last week reduced indoor meetings to 10, and this past week they did some enhanced mask enforcement. By all indications, it's going in the wrong direction, and so I think it'd be prudent for us to assume we may not have these meetings in person. Now, we may not. I think we're heading in the direction where in 2 weeks, we may not be in a situation where we're having in-person meetings again. And so my question is, how do we handle these hearings? I know that we didn't do that many virtual meetings before, but I know that public participation is hindered, particularly by teams, by having hearings during, in a virtual format. I know Raleigh's been more progressive not progressive, but staying with virtual meetings and then allowing public comment during those meetings virtually as well. And my concern is always having hearings and the public not having the same access and voice if we're in a virtual session versus being able to come in. So I guess that's an open question to council and the manager on what are the plans if if we go back to or have to go back to virtual meetings, and how are we going to handle this? We have a long list of public hearings. What is the plan for addressing that?
I would just say, obviously, we had some experience with virtual meetings, and so we would go back, I guess, and certainly recapture. There's legislative requirements as it relates to those, and of course, our attorney, previous attorney, and I'm sure our current attorney would give us guidance as we move through that process. I have every confidence we can do that. To the general public, again, there's not the same convenience, if you will, for those, at least in my opinion, they're not. But there's processes we have to follow to certainly encourage and accept public comments for those. I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to further, Ms. Jones, on that issue.
And I just want to clarify, I mean, the governor's order, government operations and educational institutions remain exempt from the indoor limit, so you can continue to meet as you are now under today's executive order. That doesn't mean that's not going to change in the future. And again, the virtual meetings do have some requirements, particularly with allowing public comment to come in up to 24 hours later. I believe last week we didn't get any public comment after the meeting, but perhaps if you go to the virtual meetings, you might want to do some more of a public education outreach to explain to people how they can participate in the virtual meetings, remind people what the format is, and that written comments can be submitted even after the hearing.
I was on a question. If there's a hearing, what good are the public comments if they come in after?
That's been a considerable debate among local government attorneys, but it is something that the legislature felt important enough to put in the bill. If comments came in after that might change your vote on something, it certainly can be, that vote can be reconsidered after that. Some jurisdictions just don't make decisions until a subsequent meeting, but then that may delay things for a few weeks. But certainly if a substantive comment came in that would have changed your mind on something, anyone who had voted in the affirmative can motion to reconsider that, and it can be taken up again.
Matt?
One other thing too, in addition to the legal requirements and, you know, what we can and can't do procedurally, there's also the technology question, and some of the platforms that we're using have evolved a lot since, 6 months ago when this first came out. And so our IT staff has been doing some research on, if we were facing, a more restrictive scenario like we were in the spring, if we were remaking some of those decisions with the tools that we have available now, would that look different, and what are our options and that kind of thing? So that's a discussion that we're in the middle of having internally, and we hope to be able to, within the next week or so, have some other options that we'll be able to discuss.
Obviously, we can't wish and hope this away. I hope we don't have to go back to those, but your point is well made. There's certainly a possibility, and I think there's some local governments around that have stuck with those for a sustained period of time, and but we shall see moving forward that's a possibility, and even and we can do some hybrid ones. I call them hybrid, where if certain council members don't feel comfortable coming, we can do some in person. Excuse me. We can have a portion of the council here and other members virtual, but it does.
And I see the value of us meeting in person. I think it's good. I worry about the disconnect with the public sometimes, and not giving them another option to engage with us, even virtually, for them to make a health decision to come here. It's prohibitive for a lot of people that might be afraid, especially as things get worse. I think over the fall, it's been kind of, people made pretty good decisions and there's masks, but I think as it gets worse, if we're going to continue to meet in person, I want to make sure that people don't feel like they can't be heard because they can't come in.
Sure.
That's just my
Okay.
continuing sort of concern.
Okay, but, yeah, there's certainly some discussions going on, and efforts will be made to try to address those concerns and issues as much as possible, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Manager, are we
Yeah, and I
finished?
was just going to add, even alongside that, we're also, the leadership team, we're already having discussions about what if we had to revert back to town hall being closed and teleworking. We've written a teleworking policy, so we need to get that passed so we can use that as a guideline for staff working off-site. So, yeah, we're already having that discussion, and we're using lessons learned. We actually, last department head meeting, talked about what did we learn from the last time we were closed and had most everybody, off campus. So we're already having those conversations.
Okay, let's see, are we at your next item, Mr. Manager? Or,
Manager reports?
I believe that's
Yeah.
where we are, isn't it?
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
One.
So I'm going to turn it over to John to give us an update on the Wake Transit Community Funding application, and then also talk about the Wake Comp Plan. And they're in, I think, a public comment period right now. So.
Gabby and Jeff last presented the transit plan. Sorry, Gabby and Jeff last presented the transit plan for the local transit to you. They mentioned that with you to talk about timing and implementing, applying for community funding area partner funding, which would help with operating that plan. One of the things that for having an application for the next fiscal year, it actually would be due in the beginning of December. Just don't have enough to have. We've not been able to have the discussion. Just about the implications to the operating budget in the 5-year plan. Staff did just want me to report back to you. Continuing to work with all the partners to make sure that we can be prepared for the next to be able to have a meaningful application month.
Okay. Any questions? All right.
And then the county comprehensive plan, I forwarded an email to council this week. You may have gotten that from other sources. Apologies if you did. Just want to make sure for your benefit as well as anyone who is listening tonight that the county comprehensive plan Wake is out for draft for review, and communication staff is promoting that on our website as well as on our social media. So for citizens and for council, please take an opportunity to do that, and please complete the survey to provide for their comprehensive planning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodges. Let's see, Mr. Manager, are you, okay, you're finished? So we are at item F, I believe, council reports. So I'll start to my right with Mr. Vance.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say, hope everyone has a great and happy and safe Thanksgiving. Remember the social distance. And as I was coming in today, just as before I arrived, I received a call from a friend of mine who told me that they had been in the hospital for a week now with COVID. It was a surprise to me to hear that. And just want to let everyone know to be careful while you're out there. Keep your distance, wash your hands, and wear your mask during this holiday season, because it was really a shocker to hear it. And I just want everyone to be cautious and safe. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to go back and forth, and I'll catch everybody, but I'll go to Mr. Matthews next.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, on that same note, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and we do have a lot to be thankful for. It's been one heck of a year, to put it mildly, for what we've all gone through and so many different subject matters, but hopefully 21 will be a lot better. And also, just as the good news on the announcement this week on the Veterans Clinic out there on Highway 50, that is a big item, and that says a lot for the town. people are coming this way and our future growth and the things we do this coming year is going to be even more important. The subjects that we take on in development and housing and the supports we got to put behind those. So it's going to be a busy year for Garner, and that's a good problem to have. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Mr. Dillinger, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, just a happy Thanksgiving, be safe. And I guess kudos to Joe and John for all the work on getting that Veterans Clinic nailed down. It fits Garner. It just fits Garner so well. Huh?
Thank you, but it's all Jeff.
Well, we know. The only other two things I have. One, if you need a Christmas tree, I hear Optimist Club's got the best Christmas trees in town. So go over there, get your Christmas tree. They wear their masks. They're being safe. We bought a couple already. I did have a question over on Buffalo Road. I've seen Raleigh Utility out there a lot in the past week. Is there, what's going on over there?
Mr. Matthews probably could answer that question, because
Over on Buffalo, Raleigh Utility trucks?
Oh, yes. The city of Raleigh, they've had that whole entire sewer system down through the wooded area down across the street from us, all the way down. Then they had some split off running off from it. It has been badly stopped up. They were in my front yard Sunday, was over a week ago, said that they're going to try to be through by the next day. And they're just now winding it down. It looks like all the equipment has been moved out, and they're bringing in rock and leveling it back off. But City of Raleigh had a mess, and I'm just very thankful that we don't have the water sewer system to deal with, because somebody paid for a lot of overtime on that. So, but they got it done. Feedback.
And a quick parks question, Ed, from an organization I work with. Do we do shelter rentals in the winter, or do we stop shelter rentals?
I mean, we still do, they're
do.
not as common, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Okay, let's see, I'm going to go to Mr. Singleton, then I'll get to Ms. Behringer. I'm going back.
See how we go.
Way to make Miss Behringer mad, and then we'll be due for a break, so you can deal with that.
I'll see if she has a spirit of forgiveness in her, yeah.
Probably not.
Thank Public Works for the fall pickup. I don't know if they've completed everything, but appreciate that. Saw a lot of yard waste out for people. We had it on our street, and I appreciate them doing that every year. We're one of the few towns that does, I mentioned this on quite a few times during the year, that has both the unrestricted pickup in the spring and the fall pickup the yard waste pickup in the fall that we put in our budget. And people expect it now because they're used to it and they appreciate it. I also want to point out and thank the folks with All-Star. The leaf pickup has started, and I think so far it's been so good, smooth. We hadn't had, we've had some rain, but it hadn't been too bad, so they've been able to get a jump on it. Of course, we know how people are about the leaves in Garner too. So another service that's provided that not every town does anymore. So thank Public Works, thank Public Works working with All-Star and doing our solid waste, recycling, the leaf pickup, the fall pickup. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Behringer, your turn.
Finally get a chance, huh? Okay. Well, I'd like to reiterate my fellow council members' wishes for happy Thanksgiving. Our family did ours this past Saturday in the backyard, and it was very nice. It was different, but it was very nice, and I did not have grandchildren running and screaming through my house. They were running and screaming outside, and it wasn't nearly as loud. So there's some good things to be enjoyed by having to do it differently. I have a couple of questions. I think, John, I think the house number is 300 West Garner Road. I've spoken to you about it before. That's the glass in one of the front windows is broken out, the siding's falling out, and I believe you told me that the landlord was in the process of working on that, doing something. My question is that house in compliance with decent, safe, and sanitary living conditions?
Yes, ma'am. There's nothing that we could find that would be citing for any housing requirements.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Broken glass in the front window. That's hard to take in. Okay. Then also the shop on West Garner Road where the granite slabs are out front instead of behind the fence. They're still not been moved back behind the fencing. So,
Staff has been attempting to work on that situation, so
Okay.
I'll try to get an update for you
right.
on that. But
has not improved since I mentioned it the last time.
that was a month when the challenges, so we'll see if there's anything we can do there.
Okay, and the last thing is that I have received some complaints about short-term power interruptions on Bryan Road in the area where the new subdivision is being built. And the last time I received a complaint, the person's, when the power came back on, it didn't last very long, but when it came back on, her computer would not work anymore and was told that the hard drive had been killed. So my question is there something going on with the construction and with the power companies and so forth out there that is causing power interruptions, because she's having it frequently?
We don't know of anything specific, but we probably would not know about that because most of those complaints would probably go to the power company. If you've got a specific address that you want us to follow up with, we'll be glad to just see if we can identify anything.
If you lose 8,000 Bryan Road. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, I believe everybody's, okay, Mr.
I just
Matthews.
want to comment one thing. Being old retired Army officer, I'm looking out in the audience tonight, and one of my favorite groups there, wonderful police department. I see a young corporal out there now, and it's nice to see those corporal stripes and a new career path advancement. And so congratulations, our corporal. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And from the mayor's standpoint, maybe for those who may be watching on TV, I just urge all of our citizens to comply with really I guess the mandates are coming out of the governor's office, but the simple process of wearing masks almost anywhere in public and doing the social distancing, following those guidelines, I believe, are stipulated for our good. I have a sense that most of the citizens in our town, I think, are certainly cooperative and doing what they should. But certainly, as I sit here this evening and I meet from time to time with the other mayors around Wake County, we're all concerned about the spike that is happening in our area. Fortunately, Wake County is, I believe, one of the yellow-coded counties. But if we all work together and follow these regulations, I think it'll help us from having to bear some more restrictive mandates in the future, possibly. So I just appeal to all of our citizens to be conscious of your responsibility to yourself and to your fellow human beings to follow these regulations. And the other thing I would say, I join the council members in wishing all of you a happy Thanksgiving. Just on a personal note, because of the concerns about COVID and COVID spreads and all the information we've been given as it relates to Thanksgiving gatherings, my wife and I, my children are grown now, but we will be breaking about a 30-year tradition, I guess, and going back to her hometown up in Salisbury and spending time with her family there this year. We feel like that's going to be inappropriate for us to do that. So I know many of you are challenged to do similar things, so urge you to stay safe during Thanksgiving. It's very important. So having said those things, I believe, yes, please.
Since we're talking about COVID, I don't have the information to announce the exact dates, but I am working with the UNC healthcare system to bring some testing back to Garner in early December. So just wanted to put that out for everybody to stay tuned for that information. And hopefully we could have as many, well, I'm not even going to say, but just stay tuned. We'll have some testing, hopefully at Avery Street, early December.
And that'll probably be helpful as we move from Thanksgiving into the Christmas holidays. There'll probably be renewed emphasis on testing if and as people travel, I would think.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, council, unless you have other business to come before the group, we need to go into closed session for 3 items at least. And so, yes, I'm going to call a recess as we go into closed session, but I need a motion, I believe, for us to adjourn here and to go into closed session from there. There's the 3 sites that are there. Mr. Attorney, I guess we need to cite each one of those, probably.
Yes, it would be a good idea to announce them for the public that's watching.
Okay, I'll go ahead, go ahead.
I'll go ahead,
Greg, you can
Mr.
read.
Mayor, pursuant to NC General Statute Section 143-318-11, subset A5, to discuss real estate acquisition. Item 2, pursuant to NC General Statute Section 143-318-11A3, to discuss litigation with staff. And item number 3, pursuant to NC General Statute Section 143-318.11, subset A, subset 6, to discuss a personnel matter with staff.
The motion's been made pursuant to these statutes. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, second by Mr. Matthews. Any question, comment? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please vote aye. Aye. If there's any opposition, no, and there is none. So I'll declare a 10-minute recess, and we will adjourn in the closed session room for these items. Okay, I call the council back into regular session. Thank you all for your patience. The council did go into closed session on a couple of 3 matters. One was to discuss real estate acquisition. The council heard from staff and gave staff some information and guidance in regards to that, and formal action will be forthcoming at a future date where an action will be taken at a public hearing, probably. On the second item, we heard an update as relates to litigation. Received that as information. No formal action was taken. Am I right on that, Mr. Manager? Then on the last matter, discussion of a personnel matter, the council heard a report on one of our personnel and had a good discussion, and no action was taken in that regard. With that, Ms. Attorney and Mr. Manager, I believe we've covered all of our business. Are we ready to adjourn? Okay, council, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Sparringer, and let's see, she's not here, so and seconded by Mr. Matthews. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and it's so ordered. I declare this meeting adjourned.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.